Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are in the world, of course, welcome to this C-Suite exchange, predominantly for CX100 winners, our new award in partnership with 8x8, but also welcoming a whole host of leaders and executives from across both HotTopics' community and the wider business community too, interested in fixing customer experience, and of course that the wider conversation around just how important experience is as a competitive differentiator for some of the world's leading organizations. Justin, thank you for joining me on this exchange. It's a lovely opportunity not just to have you joining me in celebrating our CX100 winners, but also a great opportunity to hear from your side what customer experiences means from an 8x8 perspective, the trends you're seeing, and of course a bit later on the lovely events we can look forward to together in welcoming CX100 winners to the community and celebrating the role and give them a chance to share their pieces too.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having us, Peter. I'm excited to be partnering together on the CX100 and so much happening right now. That I think it's a great opportunity for leaders to come together and just share ideas on how do we better understand and serve our customers. That to me is what this is really about, all of us getting better together.
Absolutely. And I should say, if there's any questions throughout the conversation, I believe you can either email those questions to info@hottopics.ht, or there should be a chat functionality you can drive in there. It's totally up to you. Before we get cracking though, for the benefit of those winners and for interested parties, the context for our CX100 I think is really important to showcase. HotTopics has been putting on awards now for different CXO roles for a number of years. We were actually one of the first publications in the world to launch a global Chief Information Security Officer 100 back in 2017. So awards really are within the spirit of the HotTopics community, and so many of our audiences, community members, readers, and watchers look forward to these awards every single year. One thing that I've seen as editor, though, across the many years I've enjoyed the position at HotTopics, is the growing importance of the experience with a company, both internally and externally, across the supply chain as well. Predominantly, that experience has been incredibly digitized. And so roles like the CIO, the CTO, the other director positions have taken on different charges around what that digital experience looks like across transformations, across those mobile transformations 10, 15 years ago, of course, and across organizations too. As though the product services supplied by organizations get very, very similar in terms of output as customers demand more personalized touch points. And of course, as those touch points have digitized too. What's been really interesting, and Justin, it'll be interesting to hear your point on this later, is that an individual or a team dedicated to looking at what that experience looks like is becoming so important for organizations, particularly from a competitive differentiator position. And we've been hearing that for a number of years now, but we thought 2024 was actually a good time to launch a specific award for those individuals at organizations whose specific mandate is on that experience. And that could be client experience, it could be customer experience, it could be stakeholder, digital, it could be call center, it could be a whole number of those things. And I think interestingly, a number of different role titles are reflected across the 100 winners that were chosen by this year's judges, which I think is fantastic. And of course, the list is global too, Justin. So we're seeing so many different countries and all 7 continents, 6 represented, I should say, within that list, just showcasing how different organizations in different regions are approaching those pain points. And what I'm looking forward to between now and Christmas is when we come to interview many of those CX winners, just how they're interpreting their role too. But on that interpretation piece, it's a good segue to come to you, Justin. Obviously, as an evangelist at 8x8, one of your responsibilities is to keep in the know with what's happening in the experience world. Why don't you share some of that with us today?
Yeah, happy to do that, Peter. And I want to underscore something you mentioned, and it's this kind of evolution and maturing of experience management over the past few years. And so I agree with you that now is the time to not only celebrate success, which is the essence of awards, but also bring people together to figure out how do we advance and improve what we're doing as organizations. So I think it's really valuable. I'm glad that you and your team are doing this and excited to be a part of it. So if we think about my role and even take a step back on, how and why does one become an evangelist at a business? 30-second version of my backstory, Peter, is started in the operations side of service delivery in contact centers, in hotels, in retail, and other functions of the point where a customer is interfacing with the organization, right? Whether it's over a chat, a phone, or whatever. Like that's how my story began. And over the years, once I moved out of operations, I got into training, and for a while was building global standards for organizations on how do you design and deliver customer service, and how do you design experiences for your customers across your enterprise. And then got to this point where I realized I'd spent a lot of time in people and process and strategy. And something that you mentioned, Peter, in your comments was the increased digitization, or what I think is just the use of resources that are non-human in delivering service. And I decided to spend kind of the last few years of my career really studying what's happening with technology and service delivery. And so was running an independent analyst firm, spending a lot of time just as a consultant and advisor organizations, which is how I really kind of got close with 8x8, because what they were seeing is there was a lot of disjointed experiences happening across businesses. Some of it happens in the contact center. Some of it happens to someone who may come into your home. Some of it may happen if you go into a store. It's fragmented, it's fractured. And I think it's the reason why so many of us still have really bad experiences today. So when we get to this idea of what is an evangelist, what it really means for me is this idea of how do you take something from relatively unknown to critical mass. And for 8x8, it's recognizing that organizations need to come together in a way like they never have before to better understand and better serve customers. And so that's where I spend my time. I spend my time researching what's happening inside of organizations where service is winning and service is creating friction. How are businesses thinking about the use of technology? What are the strategies that enable success? That's kind of what I think about all day, every day. So, as you want to have this conversation, I think we're going to pull from a lot of things, but it feels like the same things that I was learning about when I first got into customer experience. It's how do we make sure we have the right strategy, and the right strategy ensure that we've got the right people doing the right things at the right time, that we've got the right processes and policies in place that enable us to create safe and secure and compliant experiences, but also don't create unnecessary burdens for our customers, and how we use technology in smart ways. Those are things that time and time again, I think, come to the surface. We've just got to figure out now and moving forward, what's the right thing right now for our organizations to focus on.
Yeah, it's so interesting. When I was speaking to the judges, Justin, of which obviously you're part of that panel, when we're having those discussions, both one-on-one as groups, we're really thinking about what it takes to be a leader in this field and the questions one has to go and ask oneself in order to get the right people at the right time in the right roles, evangelizing the customer piece internally so it feels and it looks and it shows that you believe in the customer externally too. And across those touch points, one thing that came up time and time again was trust, wasn't it? And that ability of an organization to infuse trust within what they do and belief in the customer, and in turn the trust comes back. That's quite difficult to do though, given how many priorities there are, and you've listed a number of them there already, from security, safety, organizational structure, and people as well. What's your perspective on that trust piece from a customer experience perspective?
Yeah, trust from a CX perspective is no different than trust from a human perspective. It's really easy to break, and it takes a long time to restore. And what I think is most nuanced about customer experience today is CX is not one person. It's not one department. It's not even one moment in time. It's a kind of a compounding thing that happens for us over a number of modalities with a number of individuals, right? Through a number of things that are both inside of the organization's control and outside of the organization's control. And to use an example of that, so often someone somewhere in the organization is responsible for making a promise. And that promise might be that a product will work. The promise might be that an offer will be available. A promise might be that something will arrive at a certain date and time. One person makes the promise. Often for organizations, another person or team or thing is responsible for delivering on the promise. And then if the promise is broken, yet another function is responsible for addressing it, recovering it, right? You see how very quickly this is requiring a level of cross-functional coordination that most organizations just aren't delivering today. That's to me why it's so complicated. It's different, Peter, if you and I in a one-to-one relationship, you say something and you break your word, right? This is now, there's one point of failure. With organizations, there are multiple risk factors, there's multiple points of failures, and that's why it's so complicated. The fundamentals of breaking and restoring a promise are no different, but it's a team lift. That's just by nature a difficult thing to get right.
And that getting right piece, once it's done well, it really shows, doesn't it? It really, you can see the lift that an organization gets, both from a kind of internal morale perspective, but also you get that word of mouth feel that from the customers, they had a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. And there's plenty of research that's been done over the years that show the impact of service recovery, that customers who have an issue and it's recovered well sometimes show even greater loyalty and affinity. But that shouldn't be permission for us to get it wrong. I think the other thing that we have to be aware of is that there are many intangible negative effects of service failures that don't show up right away on an organization's budget or on their dashboards. I think that's, to me, what's interesting. And even this past week was having a conversation with someone of like, why are organizations so complacent about mediocre service? And the sad fact is, for a lot of organizations, they've just decided that, like, financially, it's like, does it benefit them to provide even better experiences? And unfortunately, that's a cultural and that's a leadership problem that has to be addressed if organizations really want to stand apart.
And I mentioned towards the beginning, obviously, this is our first time putting on this award. From our perspective, it felt like a critical mass of individuals discussing the experience within their remit, but also their customer experience peers. Justin, from your perspective, have you seen or noticed anything different in 2024 from the customer experience leadership position that might have impacted or affected their priorities, how they do their job, their team structure, anything like that?
Sure, Peter. A few things come to mind. And to me, this is also why this program at this time is so important. As I look at where organizations are struggling and what's kind of bubbling to the surface, there are a few things that are very clear to me. The first is that this idea of customer experience or client experience or patient experience, whatever it is still poorly defined at a wide scale. Maybe inside of an organization they've defined it, but it's not consistent from one organization to the next. But more importantly, the leadership of this function remains disparate and also ill-defined. For many organizations, the person who has CX in their title, maybe they're just responsible for surveys or customer measurement and understanding things like net promoter score, or satisfaction rates, or quality. In another organization, maybe they're actually just responsible for the customer service contact center. Or in other organizations, it's a sales function or it's an operations function, or it really does have responsibility over these touch points. One of the challenges is that there really isn't a clear owner still. And so for me, part of this program is important to show how are organizations cultivating and finding these leaders of customer experience. And to the point of a second challenge, how are they effectively working cross-functionally? This to me is one of the key challenges that's emerging in a way like never before for organizations to really get customer experience right. It's requiring a level of collaboration and transcending titles and functions and teams that, again, just hasn't existed historically. And there's implications on the tools that we use and how we think about our interactions with each other, how different teams even define success. These are fundamental challenges, Peter, that come down to, are we clear on what winning looks like? That's the first thing. When I meet with a CX leader, or more importantly, their teams, I ask them, your idea of a great customer experience, how will you know it when you see it? Quantify success for me. Start there. That's a struggle for many organizations. Then the next question that I want to follow up right away with is, what are the predictive and proactive things that you're doing and thinking about and measuring every single day that are moving you closer to or further from that definition of success? And again, second place where organizations really, really struggle. And if you struggle with defining what it looks like and what the predictive behaviors and indicators of success are, then there's no way the things we talked about earlier, people, process, strategy, technology, there's no way you can have the right things in place, because if you don't know what you're moving toward, you don't know what you need to get there. Fundamentally, Peter, that's where many organizations are getting stuck right now.
Fascinating. I mean, that flying blind piece is so important, because you actually see that across many different departments, don't you? That the lack of the lack of being able to define success and whatever success looks like in the context of the role, and perhaps it's the same for customer experience too. It also, customer experience is also difficult because humans are more unpredictable than software, tools, updates, sales targets, etc. That must complicate that further. How do you bring that into the equation?
Yeah, two things you mentioned there, Peter, that I want to touch on. The first is that measure of success. And this is a catch-22, because organizations need to have function-specific goals. For example, if I'm on a sales team, I have specific objectives and measures that are geared towards my success as a seller. If I'm in customer service, I've got measures of success as a customer service. If I'm in retention or legal or finance, right? I've got all of these metrics that are built fit for form in my function. But if I take a step back and I look across, hey, for you as a seller, does what you're doing, sure, it helps the business, but how does it help the customer? More importantly, everything that happens after you, what is the domino that we're setting up that if something goes wrong here, now no one else will be able to be successful, or others will have to work harder to achieve their objectives? Organizations aren't thinking that way. So that to me is like one of the challenges, that we need to have team-specific goals and objectives, but we also have to have a way to step back and understand how it all ladders together into the full customer experience. To your point about the most volatile resource on the planet, humans, there's two sides of that. There's the side of the humans who are coming in need of something, whether it's for the first time, I have a problem I'm looking for you to solve through your product or service or offering, or your product or service or offering created a problem for me and now you need to make it right. Right? Any number of factors can be there, and like, we don't have enough time today to talk about human psychology, but we can build on it as we go through this series and conversations together. I think the thing we all need to be thinking about right now, and what's the real challenge here, is we know that through technology and automation and AI and all of these other things, that a lot of the types of interactions today that are predictable, that are repeatable, that are low in volatility, we're going to be able to automate or at least reduce the human burden on a lot of those interactions. That's inevitable over time. Where I am talking to senior CX leaders today is, what is the implication that that's going to have on how I develop and mature my team now, so that they're ready in 12 or 18 months from now? Because Peter, one of the gaps that has a very real potential of existing is this one. Let's say today, and technology is capable of this, I can automate a lot of things, right? If I automate a lot of those things, then the stuff going to my people is more complicated and more complex. It takes time to develop and train and resource and enable people to handle the more complicated and the more complex. So I can't just turn on automation today without experiencing a gap in the capability of my workforce. And so your question, where's the challenge? The challenge is, how do we think about maturing and developing the capability of the workforce today and over the coming months, so that as technology, right, technology's there now, but as we introduce it more and more into our environment, we're not creating a massive gap in how humans are able to step into the service experience.
It's so interesting you say that, Justin. At that time, I've had a couple of questions come in over email whilst we've been talking. One of which is, my biggest challenge remains organizational structure. What's your advice on connecting departments around that customer success piece? I presume also that departments also means connecting talent. There's going to be a huge shift in talent moving forward, the whole company, right? It's not just CX departments looking at this. This is an organizational wide challenge or opportunity, dependent on where you lie on the optimism scale. I know it's a sort of a new and evolving discussion and trend, Justin, but any kind of insights on either stopping those gaps, cultivating talent at the moment, or at the very least, pragmatic solutions that people can draw upon today?
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. And whoever sent that question, first thing I'm going to affirm you for a minute is you are far from alone. This is the very real challenge, and the encouragement I make to anyone who's whether by title or by conviction have kind of stepped into this role of CX leadership. I think there's two traits that you should just embrace and go all into. And that's the first is to be a connector. I think it's so important for people who are responsible for CX in their organizations to be proactively reaching out to other functions, to other peers, to other leaders, to understand what's happening inside of their organization. Where are they running into challenges? Don't wait for them to come to you. One of the things I think about, Peter, so there was a time that I was working for an organization. My title was CX, but really my key function was quality, training, and contact center enablement, right? So I did a lot of voice of the customer and NPS and surveys and all that kind of stuff. And something that I did every single week was pick 2 to 3 individuals in other parts of the organization, and I just grabbed time with them. Sometimes it was coffee, sometimes it was a phone call, sometimes it was a video chat. And it was just, I needed to know everyone that had key responsibilities in other parts of the organization to start to informally bring that together, right? I couldn't wait for them to come to me. And in this particular case, we were on the same floor as marketing, and often they put a campaign into market. People call our 1-800 number and we had no idea about it. Not because there was any malicious intent. They didn't know what they didn't know. And so for me, the first challenge is you need to just proactively be a connector, start to build relationships inside of your organization. Yes. Over time, go ahead, Peter.
No, I was going to make it, identify the known unknowns, and that might help unearth the unknown unknowns.
Exactly. And for us in this particular organization, what that ended up doing is I found there were other people in other parts of the organizations who felt the same, I'm going to say, burden that I did, and they wanted to improve the customer experience, but they're like, who are the right people to bring together? And so we actually ended up forming, because we didn't have a corporate CX leader, right? But we found an executive who's willing to be an executive sponsor of us pulling together a group of cross-functional leaders who once a month we're talking about what are things that we can do collectively to better serve our customers, right? This to me is one of those moments, Peter, where we don't have to ask for permission. We need to ask for forgiveness in bringing people together to solve some of these problems. That to me is the first part, be a connector. The second thing is I don't want to have any of us lose our curiosity. And more what I mean by that is our curiosity of what it's like to actually be a customer for our businesses. Look, focus groups are great, surveys are great, but the more that we can expose ourselves to the nitty-gritty of what we actually put our customers or patients or constituents through, the better prepared we are to address it. And so for me, it's ask questions, be willing to be adversarial to the way you do things today. Because again, the greatest roadblock that I see actually stopping organizations from being their best at CX is inertia. It's complacency. It's the status quo. And so we have to get past that, and we have to get into moments of uncomfortableness if we want to grow as organizations.
Yeah, fascinating. Looking at that, ask for forgiveness, not for permission, when building around success teams, or actually just at the very least interested parties. Again, one of the questions that come through is actually a very common question we get in these kind of conversations. It is, do you think a CX or customer experience leader deserves a seat at the top table? And if so, what would your arguments be in support of this? Now, from my side, Justin, I mean, we do get that question very often. Putting a seat at the table, at the executive table, isn't a silver bullet for the challenges or the responsibilities of that role or function, right? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Do you agree? Do you have a different perspective than I?
Yeah, Peter, there's a couple things that I'll mention. One, this was a number of years ago, and I was in a session, and there are very few moments where I have loud outbursts, and this was a moment where I had a loud outburst. And someone said that customer experience is everyone's job. And part of me is like, gosh, I think I agree with that. But I was like, wait, if it's everybody's job, then it's nobody's job, because what happens is everybody assumes someone else is going to pick up the slack. Again, most volatile resource on the planet, humans, we tend to be our own worst enemies at times. I believe a few things, Peter. One, I believe that an organization's culture around what matters most has to cascade down from the CEO of the organization, because that is the only person in the organization that has leadership responsibility for the rest of the org. Now, notice I didn't say that it's completely directed by them, that all of the programs and how it manifests comes from them, but it has to cascade out of them, because you can be a chief customer officer, you can be a chief customer experience officer, but there's still one person who has the trump card over, this is actually what matters to this team. These are the things at the end of the day that win or don't win. And so I think having someone at the senior level who is responsible for design thinking and is responsible for seeing the touch points, I see tremendous value in that. But if they don't have the CEO in their corner and a believer and an advocate for what needs to happen in the organization, it will fall flat. So to me, there's great benefit from having someone there, but it still has to truly thrive. I think having that most senior executive on board is a key component to it.
The other thing I want to touch upon, because I think it's really important, is AI. And then for the audience's benefit, we will discuss some of the exciting opportunities between now and Christmas we have for our CX community, not least a masterclass hosted by Jeremy White, Senior Innovation Editor for Wired Magazine, next month in October, not least award ceremonies in Nashville, Tennessee, and at BAFTA HQ in London later in the year as well. And of course, opportunities to record podcasts. However, AI, Justin, it'll be silly of us not to discuss it, even if it does take over many conversations. It is important though, and especially from a CX perspective, because of the conversation we've just had on automation, digital touch points, human use, and of course, the context of a economically volatile market.
Yeah, where do we begin, Peter? That's such a wide, loaded topic.
Yeah, it is. We've really got a couple of minutes, really. From your perspective, Justin, what are the key takeaways from utilizing AI at the moment for CX leaders? Maybe you can touch upon one core challenge and one core opportunity that's really exciting you.
Yeah, Peter, I'm going to go back to a conversation that I had with the leader around developing and evolving their people. That conversation started as an AI conversation, and that was the least of their concern. Now, mind you, they're an enterprise. And so what I think is interesting for large businesses have teams that they've got data engineers, they've got data scientists, they've got design thinkers, and AI at its kind of full stop greatest capacity, right, is going to require us to do data exercises like we've never done before at organizations. For all the reasons you and I talked about, we're talking about multiple systems that define things multiple ways that now have dependencies that they've never had before. And so I think for organizations that are really looking to put all of their cards in on this AI game, what it really is having implications around is the integrity of their data, how they think about governance and taxonomies. And like, this is like nitty gritty, hard work. And that's where I see the organizations that are trying to win at AI. That's where they're focused right now. It's what's the right problem for us to go after? How do we design this in the right way? Once we design it, what does it look like to deploy it? How do we test it and make sure that it's working? And how do we evolve it? Right, at a high level, that to me is the biggest challenge. Is there's just a lot of like deep, intensive work that needs to happen to do it kind of at its coolest, most interesting capabilities. What I think is most exciting right now is where I see organizations able to fail fast and to deploy AI to help augment human capacities. I've been doing some interesting studies right now, Peter, on what's happening with AI through quality evaluation and agent coaching. I think the agent assist technologies that are out right now are just incredible in how they're enabling people just to feel more confident and capable in delivering service. So to me, the most exciting part about it in all applications is it's freeing humans to feel, again, more confident and capable in what they're bringing to the table. That's what gets really exciting for me, Peter.
And do you have any kind of favorite examples that are top of mind? That's also one of the questions that's come through as you were talking. Anything that's stuck in your mind, perhaps in a news context or something you read or seen yourself?
So I'm gonna avoid the news context, and I'm gonna go to something that I've seen myself. Not that we go after sensationalism with AI or anything, but here's the thing here. Here's two very real examples of how I see organizations doing like really cool stuff with AI. The first is around, a big part of my background, as I alluded to earlier, is on the quality assurance, the training, the coaching side of service delivery. And I so often would get supervisors and analysts bogged down in having to observe all these interactions where what they really wanted to do is spend more time coaching. And just incredible ways that I'm seeing right now AI step in, that it's listening to the interaction that Justin and Peter had, and it's able to call out what was mentioned, what was good, what was not, how the kind of the emotional kind of journey played out over the course of the interaction. And to then summarize for the coach to say, hey, here's one thing for you to focus on based off of what I know is most important to your organization right now. Like what that enables in terms of a human development standpoint is so cool. So I love that. The other real example is I remember, so when I was doing contact center training, we didn't have a great knowledge base. And at the time, you walked out of training with, Peter, a massive binder. I probably have an example of one that's hiding behind my name badge on the video window here. And I mean, massive binder. And so if you couldn't remember something, there you were an agent on the phone and you're flipping through your binder and you had tabbed and you had highlighted. And this is how you're, and look, that was over a decade ago, and I know there's still organizations that's the reality today. Mm-hmm. And when I watch now organizations that have agent assist technology in place and a question comes up, instead of me flipping through a binder or scouring a knowledge base, it just pushes it out and it says, Justin, Peter asked about this. Here's a recommended resource. Or based off of what Peter's contacting you about, here are a few things that will help you be successful in your interaction with him. Like when I think about what I felt as an agent or even as a trainer, I mean, that is revolutionary in terms of what can happen on those interactions. And that to me is so freeing and so exciting. So again, just two quick examples, but I think lots of potential. And we're like, Peter, we are just getting started. That's the other crazy part about this. Like we are in infancy right now. There's so much ahead of us.
Yeah, and it's great to whet the appetite, really, because, Justin, as I've mentioned, next month we are welcoming Jeremy White, the Senior Innovation Editor for Wired Magazine, as our exclusive masterclass speaker for CX100 winners. Jeremy is also an AI expert, so I'm really looking forward to, in that hour and a half masterclass, Jeremy deep diving not just into the lay of the land for the customer experience, which our audiences know very, very well. These 6 winners live and breathe it every single day, but how different sectors have interpreted that, what's happening in different organizations all over the world, and crucially, from his experience reporting on this for for many, many years now, how AI has upped the game, what customers are thinking about, how they're being treated, how they're changing, perhaps in very either sudden or unpredictable ways. Again, it comes down to that unpredictability of the human individual and group, which changes. And I think that's what makes this role really exciting, very dynamic, but also a sort of challenge each day. So yes, for those listening and watching wherever you are, 3rd of October, if you haven't registered already, it's Jeremy White, the Senior Innovation Editor for Wired Magazine, will be delivering a virtual masterclass exclusively for Hot Topics and 8x8 as part of our CX100 campaign. We then have in Nashville, Tennessee, the studio event, and within that, a Hot Topics and 8x8 award ceremony for CX winners. Of course, US-based, you're more than welcome. You'll be able to pick up your physical trophy there, join other executives across the CIO, CTO, CISO, data and digital executive roles, and of course meet peers. Back to Justin's point at the very beginning of this C-suite exchange, an award is not just a celebration of good talent and good work, it's also a great opportunity to bring peers together to further your opportunities and further your work too. We go furthest together, as the axiom says. For any individuals who can't make it to the US, we do have a European award ceremony too. It's going to be hosted at BAFTA HQ in central London, BAFTA being the UK equivalent really of the Oscars. It's a beautiful stage and space in central Mayfair, St. James. Beautiful space, state-of-the-art work as well. So we'll have an award ceremony there as well, and you'll be able to collect your trophy too. And again, you'll be alongside other tech C-suite positions as well. The final thing is we're also, Justin and I, on behalf of us, are welcoming podcast guests to join us on the C-Suite Spot, Hot Topics' podcast for executives and leaders. On this, Justin and yourself and myself will hopefully have a lovely conversation, understanding your role, your responsibilities, and of course, your interpretation of the CX position too. It's a great opportunity to share your learnings, celebrate your winning, of course, to our global podcast audience as well. That's everything I wanted to cover in terms of the output and the exciting things we've got planned this year. Justin, do you have any final comments or words or closing thoughts for our audiences?
Peter, it's interesting. I keep looking at data that paints an unfortunate picture, I think, of customer experience. I see data that CX programs are at risk of being defunded. I see data that shows that consumer sentiment is at an all-time low. And I can imagine for a lot of us, it feels like I've been working really hard. I've been doing all of these things. Why is it not paying off? And I want to encourage, and I want to just remind everyone that I actually believe that it is. And, things like this, what we're all stepping into together, are the perfect catalyst for us to help our organizations get even further ahead. You're not doing this alone. You now have an amazing community of not just 100 other individuals who are leading customer experience, but all of the Hot Topics community that's bringing people together. And I think, Peter, that's what's exciting for us about 8x8 is just this opportunity for us to learn and drive better results. Like for all of us to step back in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, and be really, really proud of the work that we've done. That's what we want this to be about. And that's what we're excited to be working with you together to make happen.
Brilliant. Justin, thank you so much for your time. It's really fantastic to learn more about the evangelist position and, of course, and hear from your perspective where you get to cover and speak to so many people in this sector, in this industry, in this position, and share some of that too. So looking forward to learning more from you across our podcasts and across the year as well. And thank you to all of those watching, and thank you to all of those who put forward your questions. I'm sorry there wasn't more time to answer all of them, but I think, as you can appreciate, Justin has shared so much information. I want to make sure we keep some for our podcasts too. Justin, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching wherever you are in the world. This has been Hot Topics and 8x8 for our C-Suite Exchange, fixing customer experience.